Hey everybody, Mend from HowToPriest. Just making a quick video here today to go over some talents here for Discipline Priest. Um, I get a lot of questions as far as, what are the best talents to do for raids? What are the best talents to do for dungeons? So hopefully this video goes through enough detail and gives you a good understanding of what talent choices to pick depending on what content you're doing. So to start off, the level 15 tier, the Penitent, Castigation, and Schism. So the Penitent turns our penance into a friendly heal that we can cast on a friendly target. It's not a very good choice for any content. Penance is our largest group heal because we are group-wide healers because of the way Atonement works. Penitent just doesn't really work with it. It would make us more of a single target spot healer, but not as good as other classes. So it's really not a good choice, regardless. Castigation is the go-to pretty much all the time for me. It increases your penance by 33% flat because it adds an extra tick of penance to the duration of the channel. So Castigation is probably my recommended choice almost 100% of the time. Schism is a good choice for dungeon content if it's pretty easy. I still don't run it. I just like Castigation. I don't have to fill in, I don't have to have this very set rigid rotation while I'm playing. And basically the reason Schism isn't as good is it costs mana. So for raids, it's a no-go. In dungeons, it's kind of awkward to continue the rotation. You have to keep casting Schism every 6 seconds because it's on a 6-second cooldown. It lasts for 6 seconds in order to keep the buff up. But it does buff not only your penance, but your smites, your dot, everything else increases. So in a perfect world, yes, it's more throughput, but obviously in theory and in practice are two different things. So up to you. I'd recommend Schism on easier content if you just really want to blow through it. You're doing lower level Mythic Pluses. Schism's probably a better choice for you. Castigation, on the other hand, is probably my recommended go-to 100% of the time. I just never switch. So level 30 tier, you have Angelic Feather, Body and Soul, and Masochism. Angelic Feather is the go-to. It places a feather wherever you place it. If you have a macro, which I'll link in the description below, this talent is just too easy to use because you just hit the button and it places it right under you. It's your oh shit button if you need to move quickly out of something. It's just a better choice overall than the alternative speed increase, which is Body and Soul, which requires you to cast Power Word Shield or Leap of Faith to increase the movement speed of that target by 40% for 3 seconds, which in theory sounds great. You can put, Power Word Shield yourself and run every 6 seconds, which you could do more frequently with Angelic Feather. However, the way that a future talent works, Shield Discipline, it just makes it a not very good talent choice because you need to be casting Power Word Shield on targets you know are going to take damage to break the shield so you can get the mana regeneration from Shield Discipline, which I'll describe later. So Body and Soul just doesn't quite fit in with the way that we play right now, unfortunately. And Masochism is it could have some benefit in certain situations. So basically what Masochism does, and they just changed this with the patch 7.1.5 a couple months ago or a month ago, makes it so when you cast Shadowman on yourself, it does the dot effect that would normally damage you now heals you and reduces all the damage you take by 10% during the duration of it. So sure, it could have some use in some Mythic Plus content, maybe some really off-the-wall raid content where you don't need the movement speed. You could use it. So honestly, in most raid content, you're going to have to move out of something. You're going to have to move quickly. You're going to have to get out of the way. Angelic Feather is probably your go-to. And this takes me to level 45 tier. Excuse me. We have Shining Force, Psychic Voice, and Dominant Mind. So Shining Force is pretty much my go-to for all dungeon content except for certain weeks. So Shining Force knocks back enemies around your target, not just yourself, so you can cast it on the tank or someone else or whoever. Um, in most cases, I just cast it on myself, but it knocks back the mobs and reduces their speed by 70% for 3 seconds. So it's really good on weeks with, let's say, Necrotic for Mythic Plus. So you can knock back the mobs. The tank has more time to run away, and Kite so he can drop his Necrotic stacks. It's also just good in general, just to get things out of the way. Let's say you have Sanguine and you have mobs just kind of standing in stuff. You can knock them out. So really good choice. Psychic Voice is good. Personally, I don't use it as much. It's probably a pretty good choice if you use Sephuz. Sephuz is secret because the disabling effect triggers that, and this talent takes Psychic Scream from 1 minute to 30 seconds. So it's probably actually a pretty good choice for that talent tier if you do use Sephuz. Personally, I think maybe Psychic Voice would be a better choice in a raid setting if you're using Sephuz because you can use it on small ads and prockets. So that's really up to you, but that is a way to use Psychic Voice. Dominant Mind is the other one that I use frequently in Mythic Plus content. What this does is it turns your mind control from being an active ability where you have to actually control the mob to now um, it basically turns it into a pet, more or less. So um, what that allows you to do is allows you to continue healing while you have the mob mind controlled and CC'd effectively. This also means that that mob will not take so weeks where there's bolstering. I may have that wrong. When a mob dies, it buffs the other mobs around them. This bypasses that, so they will not get buffed if they are mind controlled because it is your pet and it is not their ally. So hopefully that makes sense. However, it does turn your mind control into a 2-minute cooldown, so keep that in mind. You can only use it every 2 minutes, but it is good in certain circumstances when you need to mind control, especially in higher Mythic Plus content. So level 60 tier, we have Power Word Solace, Shield Discipline, and Mindbender. Power Word Solace is not a very good choice. You could replace your Smite cast with it. The problem is it's not really adding any benefit. It gives you some fairly steady mana regeneration. However, it is not as good as Shield Discipline. It also doesn't really increase your damage as much, so it makes it worse than Mindbender. So it's not a bad talent. It's just the other two options, depending on what you're doing, are a lot better choices. So Power Word Solace is basically not a choice for us right now. Shield Discipline, on the other hand, is the go-to for raid content because of the fact that Power Word Shield, regardless of talent choice, should be used on cooldown all the time. It's the one of our most mana effective atonement applicators. It should be used as frequently as possible. What Shield Discipline does is it returns, instead of being a 2% cost to your mana to cast Power Word Shield, it's a 1% cost given that the shield is going to break. So when you cast, if you run with Shield Discipline, which you should in a raid, make sure that you're casting that Power Word Shield on cooldown on targets that are actually going to take the damage to break the shield. Tanks are a very obvious choice for this, but putting it on other people is important. This also pairs well with Rapture because you're putting atonements on a lot of people and it returns that mana if they're going to take damage. So if you're preparing for raid-wide AoE or there's raid-wide AoE going out and you use Rapture, you're going to get back a lot of mana from that. I've seen some people make the argument, well, you're still using mana on casting Power Word Shield. Well, yes, but like I said, it goes from being 2% to 1%, meaning if you're going to cast it anyway without the extra 1% mana return, if you can get 1% mana back, you're actually saving mana, so you can cast more Powered Radiances and what have you. So Chill Discipline, go-to for raids. Mindbender is the go-to for dungeons. And if you're wondering, my talent setup right now is my dungeon talent setup. I'll show you my raid talent setup at the end of the video here. Mindbender is the go-to for dungeons. It turns your shield or your Shadow Fiend from being a 3-minute cooldown to a 1-minute cooldown. Mindbender is slightly weaker, but it returns mana. Regardless, that's not why you're using it. You're using it because it is a 1-minute cooldown now. And because it's a 1-minute cooldown, you can use it on more trash, more bosses in Mythic Plus content. So in Mythic Plus, Mindbender is the go-to. It's going to save you a lot of headaches. So go Mindbender on Mythic Plus. 75 tier, we've got Contrition, Power Infusion, and Twist of Fate. Contrition increases atonement duration by 3 seconds, making it the go-to for raids. The alternative was Power Infusion. Power Infusion is locked behind a 2-minute cooldown. You only get it for the period that it's active, which is 20 seconds. Yes, Power Infusion does reduce mana cost by 20%. However, for pure throughput, which is what we're looking at, for pure throughput, Contrition is a better choice because it increases your atonement duration by 3 seconds. Power Infusion is roughly somewhere between 2 and 2.5 seconds, depending on your haste. It's not going to be the better choice over Contrition because Contrition is active 100% of the time, whereas Power Infusion is, locked behind a 2-minute cooldown. So raids, go Contrition. Also puts Power Infusion in an odd spot in Mythic Plus because of Twist of Fate. So Twist of Fate is my go-to for dungeon content or Mythic Plus because of the fact that if, let's say, your tank drops below 35%, which, as we all know, happens frequently, or your group takes a lot of damage and one of them or multiple people drop below 35%, Twist of Fate is not locked behind a cooldown. It is there when you need it. So it is more or less your way of stopping people from dying. So if you're running Power Infusion and you used it on the last pack and now you need it again and it's not up, it's doing you no good. And it's not, you're going to actually have a harder time trying to heal harder Mythic Plus content without Twist of Fate. Twist of Fate's also good in raids. So if you can guarantee you're going to have a high uptime because of a mechanic and people are going to be dropping below 35% frequently, Twist of Fate's a really good choice over Contrition, but it's not as frequent now in Nighthold as it was in Emerald Nightmare. So keep that in mind. I don't run Twist of Fate on any encounter really right now. I may change that up for some Mythic content, but right now I don't. So Power Infusion is just in a weird spot. You could use it, and I have used it in lower difficulty dungeon content with Schism, just to do more damage. So use it as a DPS cooldown. So kind of figure out how you want to use it, but I'd recommend Contrition for raids, Twist of Fate for dungeons, and maybe for raids, depending on the uptime. The level 90 tier, we've got Clarity of Will, Divine Star, and Halo. Clarity of Will is good for high-end Mythic Plus content. If you're really pushing high-end keys and you have a, let's say, Tyrannical or even Fortified a boss encounter or trash pack where your tank or someone else is threatened by getting insta-gibbed or one shot, Clarity Bolt's good there, which is not a lot of the time. Raids, it's more or less relegated to cheesing and a mechanic, so right now there's really nothing that you could use it on. I mean, Tichondrius, there's a mechanic that you could potentially use it on. It doesn't make it the good choice, and it's not effective. I wouldn't recommend to use Clarity of Will personally. So, Divine Star is a direct line in front of you, heals allies, damages enemies in front of you. It's good for more DPS. It's higher DPS output than Halo in dungeon content, and it's easier to control. However, it's not as good at healing. So depending on what you need for dungeon content, if you want to just do more damage, Divine Star is great. If you want to use Halo because you need a healing cooldown, use Halo. Also depends on what dungeon you're doing, because if there's a lot of trash and hard to really time a place to use Halo, Divine Star might be better. To go into that, Halo, uh, what it does is it creates a ring outside of you for 30 yards. Little note here, the graphic is not accurate, so it actually goes out a couple more yards than what the graphic shows you, so be careful. You don't want to just cast it and have a mob standing right outside the range, because Halo will hit it. I don't know why they haven't updated that, but I digress. Halo's the go-to for me for dungeon content and raid content. Dungeon content, I will, depending on dungeon, switch to Divine Star, but most of the time I use Halo just because I need it for a healing cooldown, and I like to have it there for if I do need it for that. So, um, as far as for the level 100 tier, it's also a pretty straightforward choice. You have a raid talent and a dungeon talent, and then you have a potato talent. So Purge the Wicked is our go-to raid talent. It reduces the mana cost very slightly for Shadow Word Pain, turns it into Purge the Wicked, which then, when you cast it on a mob, when you have Purge the Wicked on a mob and you cast Penance on it, rather, it will spread Purge the Wicked to a nearby enemy. So you can actually spread Purge the Wicked without changing targets. Um, it's also just a more effective dot damage-wise. So this is your go-to for raids, because and the reason for that is because Grace increases your non-atonement healing and absorption by 30% on targets with atonement. So what that means is your non-atonement healing, which includes Plea, um, Halo, and Shadowmend. Because we don't use Shadowmend very frequently in raids, it's only really affecting Plea and Halo, and because we only use Plea under 5 atonements, it's really only affecting Halo, most effectively helping Halo. So you kind of lose a lot of the effectiveness of Grace, um, just because it doesn't fit into our raid playstyle. However, it's a great choice. It's actually the only choice I'd pick for content which I actually never switch from it in dungeon content. Um, Purge the Wicked, you could switch if it's easier, up to you, but I still run Grace. It's powerful, and sometimes you just need to top people off, and it's going to help you do that. It does not. So if you Shadowman somebody who doesn't have Atonement, they're not going to actually get the 30% until you follow it up with another Shadowbend or pre-apply Atonement before you cast Shadowman. So most of the time, group's going to have Atonement on them in a dungeon because it's only 5 people, and usually you're trying to keep Atonement out on them anyway. So Grace is the go-to choice for dungeons. Shadow Covenant is a terrible choice. It costs too much mana for the heal it's doing. Even though it's instant and it doesn't take the place of Powered Radiance anymore, it doesn't heal for that much. And it's not you can't control who it's going to heal. It's just a random group of 5 people in 30-yard radius around the person you targeted, and it also leaves a healing absorb on them. So the next, half of that amount of heal is going to be wasted by whoever heals it, either yourself or someone else. It's not a very good um, ability to spam cast, especially, but it's not even that great of an emergency heal. It's not recommended. I really hope that Blizzard does something as far as fixing this talent. Either fixing it or replacing it, because honestly, it does. There's no time where I would not want to run Purge the Wicked in a raid and Grace in a dungeon, and Shadow Covenant just doesn't even entice me to want to use it. So hopefully they fix it. But anyhow, I really hope this video clarified some things. I did mention I would show my raid talents. So there you go. That's my raid talents. Um, I really hope this video helped you learn some extra things about disc talents maybe that you didn't know before, or if you're beginning, hopefully this gives you a good idea um, of the talent choices you're choosing, rather than just kind of blindly following what my guide says or someone else's guide says. So again, hope this helps you guys. Thank you for watching, and good luck.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and comment on the next kind of video that you want to see. Also be sure to join us in Discord.